Kurt, before we start, I just want to say that we've had Nance, obviously, on this program. We've had Liz Wiesen, we've had Jason O'Connell, and
Eric
many others,
Tucker.
Eric Tucker. And I just feel like without ever meeting you, I know you because they all talk about you.
Uh-oh. Yes. Well, I have a bit of a prankster reputation, and when you're in a vulnerable situation like a big part, you need a lot of support. It can be frightening because I'm owed a lot, a lot of payback, and it could happen at any moment.
Yeah. Something about jumping out of bushes and scaring people.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, that
yeah.
was started by another actor, Chris Edwards, but he does an amazing wild pig impersonation. You're walking at Boscobel along the road, and then no one expects a wild pig attack, and so he would hide there, and then people would scream, and they'd from this snorting. Anyway, so I've carried that tradition on much more than it's.
Although you were not the other night, someone did it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Now that I'm old and infirm.
That's right. It comes back. It comes back.
Yeah, it comes back to haunt you.
Hello and welcome to the State of Shakespeare. I'm Garrett Vandermeer.
And I'm Jim Elliott.
Now, longtime listeners of the State of Shakespeare may know that the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival is one of our favorite companies. We've had special guests from Hudson Valley on the podcast many times over the past 12 years. 12 years, Jimbo.
Yeah, I know. Crazy.
You've already heard a little bit from one of our guests who will be with us today. And when we received the following press release from Hudson Valley, we couldn't wait to talk to this guest and a very special second guest.
Well, here's the subject line of the press release, which obviously is a great hook. Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival's Romeo and Juliet, starring a couple in their 60s, Kurt Rhoads and Nance Williamson. And we are delighted that they are both here with us today. Hi, Nance. Hi, Kurt.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
We're thrilled to be here.
We're so happy to have you here. The press release goes on to read, married for 38 years. Kurt and Nance have been acting in Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival productions for 24 and 21 years, respectively. And Romeo and Juliet will be their 70th show together.
Actually, it's our 69th, but...
Fittingly, we thought. But anyway, they missed that one. It's not 70 just yet, but it's still a big number.
It's still a big number, yeah.
They must be planning something then for the 70s.
I guess.
Yeah, maybe it's a reprise, they'll keep it.
Oh my God,
this is a lot of shows, and we've been amazed at that number for years. So it's like it just keeps growing. And
that's an amazing longevity in this business. I mean,
yeah,
not only to be together for so long, but to be acting together and stay together for so long. That's incredible.
Well, it's like not quite half the plays have been together. And we started off in a company together. And then when we moved from Dallas, where we were at the Dallas Theater Center, to New York, so we kind of grew up with the idea of company. And so it was so valuable to me to be able to work with somebody. And so it just sort of worked out, like casting directors sort of got to know us together. And so we've played, a lot of opposite, but we've also played brother and sister, and we've played, aunt and uncle.
Or aunt and nephew.
Aunt and nephew, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Lunasa. It was
Dancing at
Lunasa.
Lunasa. So it's a memory play. So it kind of worked. But
right.
I quickly say it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So it's been really kind of a fun exploration of your marriage, but seen through different playwrights and different couples and different relationships. And
but to get Romeo and Juliet at the kind of towards the end of the career kind of deal was shocking. I was like, well, what's the concept? How are we doing that? And then, I thought, are we going to be really playing our age so that Romeo lifts his shirt up and takes an insulin shot in his belly, or he ascends the balcony, or
are we putting glasses on to read letters? And
is there Viagra involved in any way?
Viagra involved, yeah.
Where did this concept come from? Did you pitch it, or was it pitched to you? And
it was pitched to us. The director, though, I believe, pitched it to Gay Taylor Upchurch is our director, and I think she pitched it
to Davis McCullum, who's the artistic director. And then Davis called us, I don't know, around Thanksgiving and said, what do you think about that? And we laughed, and we thought, what a nutty idea. And we kind of thought about it. And
well, who refuses work in the pandemic anyway? It's like, well, of course, yes. But then we thought about it. It's like, how are we doing it?
How are we going to do that?
That was our big question with GT. And she said, I don't know. I think you're just going to lead like you've been doing. She said, like, you want to think of it as leading a company of storytellers telling the story, and we'll just tell it as truthfully as we can and see what happens. And so there was no spin, it was just tell the story. And
so we just say the lines, we don't act like young children. We just are who we are, speaking the part.
Right. Although there was a temptation to do kind of a Monty Python, breathy and reedy. What light, and just pitch it up, and then that is hideous.
That was hideous after a minute. That
wasn't even a good joke.
One of the differences is that if you're a younger person and you haven't had a relationship like the two of you, you don't have some of that wisdom. Have either of you played Romeo and Juliet in the past?
No, I've played the nurse in a number of productions, and
I've played the Prince Aeschylus, and I've played Tybalt, and I've played the friar in an audiobook, and I've directed it once at a Westchester Community College. So I've been around the play, but I've never done Romeo.
But it's so interesting, even having experience with the play, and you kind of think, well, we know what this is. All of a sudden, when you're stepping into Juliet, for instance, saying those lines, it's like, oh my gosh, there's all sorts of discovery that I didn't know. And so I was thrilled by that and kind of embarrassed that I knew the play so well and I didn't know the play that well at all from her point of view. And the range of Juliet is so extraordinary that it feels like such a privilege at 64 years old to be able to play this young woman that is, and we've done Beatrice and Benedict and Antony and Cleopatra and Mackers, and we've played all these fantastic Shakespeare couples. But there's something about this play that's sort of very eye-opening, and I'm learning so much, which is such a thrill after 50 Shakespeare plays to kind of have all sorts of sparking that you didn't expect.
I think that's right. I think Romeo, you think of it, and Romeo and Juliet, you kind of think, like a lady came up to me and said, oh, good, I'm glad you're playing it. It won't be so filled with all that whining. And I thought, is that what Romeo comes off as? I mean, to this lady it did. And but I mean, I think, it's like he's mopey because Rosalind won't return his love at the beginning. And then he's on a high with the Finding Juliet and the balcony scene and Friar Lawrence. And then, but it's always kind of an angst thing. And then when he gets banished. But I have found that, like Nance said, the range is, you feel like it's a bigger range than some of the big tragic parts, like Macbeth. Even Richard III. I was working on that a couple years ago, and that seems so gigantic. But in terms of just kind of an emotional ride, Romeo does this roller coaster that's just crazy. And even before he gets the news of Juliet's death, he has a monologue to the audience about, I had a dream where I died, and then Juliet came and kissed me, and I woke up, and I was an emperor. And isn't love great? I just have this great feeling, cheerful thoughts have lifted me up, and then he gets, so it's just this kind of, it's tragedy. So it's every turn is blocked, and then you give up, and then something new happens. Anyway, it's just a wonderful, wonderful journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that one of the things about Romeo and Juliet is that it's a love story or a romance or a comedy until the first death, which is, I think, in Act 3 or something. I mean,
Right.
It takes a while before it takes that turn. So you do have that sort of, as opposed to the inevitable walk towards the end.
Yeah, right. There's so much joy, and there's so much love, and there's such a kind of buoyancy about so much of the play early on. And even in some of the tragedy, there's such a kind of, I don't know, a shooting star of feeling that it never bottoms out, even in the dark.
So HVS says it's an age-blind production. Is that just the two of you playing Romeo and Juliet, or are there other age-blind castings?
Yeah, there's sex blind, there's age blind. So our Friar Lawrence is a young woman in her 30s, and Benvolio is a woman, and
our parents are in their 30s and 40s. So yeah,
our parents are in their 30s.
They're not
and 40s.
quite. They might be a little age blind.
So there's What GT said in terms of casting, our director GT, is that she just kind of was looking for the quality of the character in the actor. And so she was trying to keep her mind open to, anybody who brought in that into the room. So in a way, it's an idea of storytellers telling the story. And so we just happen to be the Romeo and Juliet tonight telling this story.
This is such an interesting concept, the idea of an age blind production. And definitely they're shining a light. Hudson Valley is shining a light on the fact that this is an unusual spin on it. You said that you're playing the words and you're playing the situations. Are there any aspects of the given circumstances of being 15 years old, 14 years old, 13 years old that you find are inevitable in the characterization?
I would say there's an innocence and a naivete. Like even in the balcony scene, it's like, do you love me? And I know that you'll say yes. I've read this in my books. I know you'll say yes. And I know that I'll believe you because I want to believe you. But if you swear, you may prove false. You may be lying. And they say Jove laughs at, So there's a certain amount of inexperience that is a part of Juliet.
Right. It's first time. I think that's the big difference when you're 64 and you've
had your heart broken.
You have a little more gravitas about life can, hurt. And yet Romeo enters the play with nothing but hurt and prickly pear. Just leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it. That I think is very identifiable to maybe any age. But I think discovery is kind of the thing. So every touch, every feeling can be the first time. And so there's a little bit of a challenge on that when you obviously not the first time, but the first time you touch someone's face, when you run your hand along their body. And, there's just some kind of a delicacy, I think, of the first time. And that's kind of great. I mean, great for a married couple to say,
you get to fall in love all over again.
Yeah, say, I'm going to look at you as if I'd never seen you before.
Yeah.
In this light, in this situation, with this feeling. And
I think that concept is ageless.
I had a friend of mine, she was in her 70s and she had just met someone and she goes, you know what it's like when you smell someone, when you smell like their aftershave or something, and it's like, and then somebody else is wearing it and it just kind of tickles you. And I thought, oh yeah, falling in love and new love and excitement is not relegated to youth,
Right, totally.
That no matter what age you are, those feelings are hoped for. There's so much hope and there's so much fear and there's so much anticipation. And I think that is timeless.
Well, you mentioned it, so I don't want to get too personal, and obviously you don't have to answer this question, but how has working on this particular incredible love story informed your relationship?
Oh, I mean, I've just been thrilled to do it because, when I first met Kurt, we were doing As You Like It, and I didn't like him at first. And we had this scene where the way it was staged, Orlando is fighting Charles, the wrestler, and it was across the room. And I had to see him kind of fall in love from a distance, eyes across the room kind of thing. And I noticed these brown eyes. And I had a few days before had a dream about these brown eyes. And I just thought it was my boyfriend at the time because he had brown eyes. And as I'm really looking at Kurt, really trying to fall in love with this guy I'm mad at, across the room, I realized they were Kurt's eyes. And I thought, oh, I need to pay attention to this. The universe is talking to me. I was 25. And so it's such a vivid memory to me about falling in love with Kurt. And so now the idea of seeing Kurt kind of across the room again with those brown eyes and seeing them anew and afresh, that it kind of unzips all those memories that, not that they really have gone away, but that you're in them.
Right.
You're in them. So the play really connects up to the personal, and it's all encased in Shakespeare, so it's like,
Awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah.
I think it's this is a much kinder play to a relationship than, if you're doing George and Martha in Virginia Woolf.
One would say.
Each other's scabs. This one is more, how can I be of service to you and to our life together? And
right.
That kind of feels like the overall vibe is one of connection and not one of
destruction.
Destruction. You're right.
Right. Yeah.
So it's actually been fun, I think, to and it's also been scary. I think just because it feels out of your safety zone, playing a part that you're 40 years too young or whatever you are, and so then we kind of temper that with maybe by doing our best text work on the line, maybe something in the line opens up and people hear it in a different way than if a brilliant 22-year-old actor right out of grad school is playing Romeo, then maybe there's something different that will be heard when a more experienced actor is playing it with a deeper voice, with we just kind of hope that does happen. And I think we're getting the idea that it is, that there's something about the text is alive in a different way.
Do you ever wink at the audience? Like acknowledge that?
No, there's a couple of moments. There's in the scene with Lady Capulet and the nurse, and in the beginning of the play, and they mention she's not yet 13 or whatever it is. And so the audience kind of looks to me like, how is she going to handle that? And I just smile. There's no real acknowledgement of the age. I would say there's no direct acknowledgement of that, but there's not a kind of embarrassment about it either. There's just a kind of like, right.
Yeah, I think if you're ultimately wanting to get to the tragedy, you want them to identify with you as much as possible. And even if it's, and I don't think you want to let them off the hook too much.
Just to return for a moment to something you mentioned a little while ago, Nance, about attempting to fall in love with Orlando and and maybe inadvertently falling in love with Kurt at the same time, right. Across a room within the context of a Shakespeare play. What a great segue to one of the pieces that you chose to share with us today, which is the Holy Palmer's kiss scene.
I think it's Act 1, Scene 5.
I love this scene. It's just indelible. It's just indelible in my mind from the Zeffirelli production, which is so lavishly gorgeous. It'll be really fun to hear you do this scene. Would you do it for us?
Sure. I don't know if I can do it without acting it with him, but maybe we will.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah. Okay.
If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this: my lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss.
Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is Holy Palmer's kiss.
Have not saints lips, and holy palmers too?
Aye, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer.
Then, dear saints, let lips do as hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair.
Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake.
Then move not, whilst my prayer's effect I take. Thus from my lips by thine, my sin is purged.
Then have my lips the sin that they have took?
Sin from my lips, O trespass sweetly urged. Give me my sin again.
You kiss by the book. And then the nurse.
Delightful. Okay, so I've always had a question about this scene. First of all, it is a sonnet, right? They create a sonnet.
Yeah.
But I've always wondered about your last line, Juliet. You kiss by the book.
Yeah. Well, it can be different things, I think. In all the prep for the thing, you read all the different notes and you read everything. So one, you kiss by the book can be like, that kiss is right out of a manual, that you kiss very
standard.
Correctly.
Yeah. But the way we're kissing, and also the way we've set it up, there's a couple of little references, this being one, and Lady Capulet talks about Paris, and he's like a book uncovered, look into the margin of his eyes. And so there's all these book references. So when I make my first entrance, I have a book, so that she's like a smart girl. She's sitting in her bedroom reading this book. And so this is how she's kind of understood life, is that she's in this Verona world that's very dangerous, that she lives a very kind of cloistered, quiet, indoor girl life. And so her understanding of love, her understanding of romance, her understanding of everything is from books. So she's a smart, inexperienced young woman. And so when you kiss by the book can also be "You kiss like better than any romance novel I've ever read."
Right.
That's kind of how I'm taking it. And the way we also have it staged, it's during the middle of this ball, and Kurt and I step on these chairs, so we're above the audience and above the company, and they're all kind of dancing in slow motion low below, and it's sort of, I wouldn't call it erotic, but it's a kind of sensual movement of bodies underneath, as if they're the stirrings of what's happening between Romeo and Juliet in this. And so, and then when the nurse, she breaks that you kiss by the book, that it's really breaking a moment of connection as opposed to a moment of
like, ew.
Teasing. Yeah. Teasing.
So if I were describing Romeo and Juliet, if I'd never seen it before, but describing it based on what I just saw and heard the two of you do, I would say Romeo and Juliet, they are really, really intelligent, and they have so much fun together.
Yeah, I think so. Because that scene is a sonnet, you kind of think, okay, is that just Shakespeare's way of writing the play? Or is it not only the kind of flirtation and connection and chemistry that the two of them have, but also that they're able to speak to one another in how they say the words is also, so it's about two hearts meeting and two minds meeting and two everything's meeting, that they've really found a kind of connection that's full-bodied and full-minded and full-hearted. And so the form of it is as thrilling as is the spark of their sexual connection or their romantic connection.
Right.
I know, finding the rhyme, like in that sonnet, taking the rhyme that someone sets up and finishing it, and then starting one, and then they finish that. I mean, it reminds me a lot when you see people, and I'm not one of them, that is really good at freestyle rapping, where they can and then just extemporaneously rhyme it and take the content and play with it. So we've thought of it like that it's just this, it's a foreplay game in a weird way. And it's like, but of the mind that kind of, and Romeo, I think, has just been dying for a connection. I mean, he and Mercutio do this kind of wit play, but with this woman that he's attracted to, I think it just exponentially makes his blood heat.
So to speak.
Yes.
It really makes me want to see this production. The knee-jerk reaction about Romeo and Juliet is that they're a couple of beautiful fools, very young, beautiful fools. They fall in love. They make bad choices all along the way that ends in tragedy. And back to what you were saying, Kurt, I really feel like the two of you have paved the way for the tragedy because we are going to be invested in you and in your relationship. And when things go, spoiler alert, they don't go well at the end. I think that the audience is really, really going to be impacted.
Yeah. There's something going on like right now with like gun violence and young people kind of taking the violent way. Maybe that's always been around. Maybe that's what this play also says. But I wonder about, there's a moment when Tybalt challenges Romeo, and you think, and I just felt like Romeo's got this moment, I could just say, I married Juliet, Tybalt, don't fight me. I'm your kinsman now. But that might also lead to violence there. And he chooses to just say, I'm not going to fight you. He seems to be taking the nonviolent choice, and Tybalt won't let it go, and it falls apart. But for me, that moment is one of those that like opened up this time around. It's like that Romeo can see, here's a point, this interstitial point that it's like, if we go wrong here, this could be bad. So I'm gonna try to make it go right. And then Mercutio kind of stirs it up and makes it to where they can't do anything but pursue it. But I'm so kind of interested in this. If we didn't keep secrets, I feel like that our secrets somehow get the better of us in this one. And it starts with the friar too. We're going to do this little secret plan, and and then that just starts getting them in trouble. And then every step along the way, it's like, well, then when Tybalt is dead, then maybe that was the time to open up. But they don't. And so then, and then Paris. I mean, all these other lives get tragically end because we kept it to ourselves. And so I kind of find that.
Yeah. There's a couple of times in the play too where you think, could I go tell mom and dad? Or could I tell somebody? Should I open my mouth? And it's like, they don't. And the friar has a plan, and then has to make another plan, and then there's another plan. So the only person, I have the nurse on my side up to a certain point until she says, Mary Paris, go ahead. Romeo's a dish clout compared to, and so so my father has nearly disowned me. My mother says no to me. The nurse has disappointed me to the point where I sever my heart from her. And so the only person left is the friar, who had the plan for Romeo to survive, and the plan for me to go into the crypt, and the plan for us then to run away to Mantua. And so it's like all these plans that seem like they could work, and then they don't, and they just don't. But telling what really happened never was one of those plans.
If only.
Yeah, if only.
Right.
So that might be the youth.
Yeah, that might be the youth. And that, it takes place in 4 days. So time is kind of the pressure cooker of the events of the thing. You're going to get married tomorrow. Oh, no. Or in 2 days. No, we're going to change it to tomorrow. And then it's like, oh, okay.
I just thought of this. You're kind of your father's daughter. He's trying to hurry up that marriage to Paris. And you're the one that in the balcony scene says, if your purpose is marriage, then let's get it going.
Yeah.
Right.
I am my daddy's daughter. Yeah,
One real quick, going back to the scene that you just read, you were talking about how it's a meeting of the minds as well as the body and the excitement. And I think that's like, you both have played Beatrice and Benedict.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they connect as well.
Right.
And I think throughout a lot of Shakespeare's plays, the lovers connect not just in that physical way, but up here. And I think that this is it's not, that teasing Beatrice and Benedict quality. It's that we can do this. We can actually put these lines together as a couple. And I just love that that's part of what Shakespeare is exploring here.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking too that sometimes if you've cast a Romeo and Juliet that are both young actors that don't know each other, especially if they don't know each other, to kind of find that thing. We have the last time that they did it here, we were not in that production, but the Romeo and Juliet married. The actors married one another.
Loving them.
Yeah. And so I think there's a kind of, sometimes a connection gets made, and it's like Shakespeare is your wooing words, Shakespeare is your, but I think it's difficult if you don't have that. I don't know what chemistry is. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't know how you can make it until you you can rehearse it to a certain extent, but I don't know how you get the spark.
That's why so many, it's sort of a stereotypical thing that Romeos and Juliets fall in love.
Right. Yeah.
And
sometimes it lasts, and sometimes it's a showman's.
Then 3 weeks into the run, they break up, and it's a disaster.
Yeah, right. And then it's trouble. Then
the tragedy is real.
Yes.
Real.
Yeah, just before, I can't resist. I'm just intrigued by this idea that you've done almost 70 productions together. And when I think, oh, wow, what does that really mean for a relationship? I imagine, well, what if a couple read a book together, like one book together every year? Wouldn't that be a bond strengthening activity? But to do 70 productions where you go, we're not talking about a book of the month club. We're talking about textual analysis and rehearsing together and inhabiting those worlds together and performing for an audience and learning about what it means to be human over and over and over again through so many different lenses. It's astonishing. And what a wonderful thing you all have together.
I feel so grateful because it was not by design, really. I'm so glad it worked out that way. And so I have a real gratitude that we've been able to kind of find a home at Hudson Valley during the summers. And what was unique about that was that it was in this beautiful tent at this beautiful location, and it was outside, and it kind of took Shakespeare text and made it more, alive for me or visceral for me, just because Mother Nature was such a part of the whole event.
The shows have magic out there. That's kind of it's a great venue, and we just feel like every night has this chance to be really special for weird reasons. Last night we had a generator back up, and it made this loud noise during the lark scene. As we're like, it was the lark, herald of the morning, just like tender little moment, like
tender post
pop. Yeah. But then at the end, we walk out and they've got a moon kind of up in this tree that pops, and it's really beautiful. And but just so happened last night, and the moon's getting towards full right now, but the real moon was behind the tree, and just just
So there were
perfectly
two
in
moons.
line with it, and
we're
just
dead.
above it.
We're dead. Walking.
Yeah.
Walking into these two moons,
It was just like,
and that may never be quite the same again.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, that place has individual. This is the night that happened moments almost every night. So that's kind of a joy of playing there.
Absolutely.
But anyway, when you first got into Hudson Valley, you thought, well, is that any good?
well, I had done Shakespeare in the Park in the city, and so you kind of have ambitions for yourself as a young actor, and you kind of think, I don't know if I should go up to a tent and roll around in the mud. I'm not quite sure if that's, when you're young and you're thinking those ways, if that's the right thing to do. Yeah, you're on sort of an ambition trajectory that you think. And then after a while, I don't know when you become aware of it, but it's like, oh no, I feel like I'm so discovering something much bigger than ambition, whatever that was at the time, that it really is feeding all sorts of parts of you. And that it's that if I am open to that and willing to do those things, that my life becomes far richer than any kind of ambition that I might have had. And so that Kurt and I are walking through that together, you feel held in a way. You feel held by the universe and held by Shakespeare. And as you said, I've just learned so much about being a human being by doing these plays that my gratitude knows no bounds.
Yeah. Sounds like you also were just describing a good relationship too.
Yeah, I think we feel pretty grateful and fortunate that theater hasn't kind of torn us up.
I feel very fortunate and that we've been able to do that. But it's sort of, it feels like great for the younger actors to see it's possible. It's possible to have a life in the theater, to have marriage, to have.
And you don't have to be a movie star, a television star.
That's right.
Or a YouTube star.
I feel so grateful.
Right.
So this current production opens on Friday, and by the time this episode is out there, you'll be well underway, and it runs until September
18th.
September 18th is closing night.
Yeah.
And they're doing extending the festival a couple of weeks this year, and it's at a new location. It's at formerly the Garrison Golf Course still in the area, just like a mile from the old site at Boscobel. But so it's a brand new learning curve in terms of the tent's the same, the audience configuration's the same, but the view is of like a hill with an amazing copper beech tree. I don't know if you know that kind of tree, but
they light it from below, and it just looks like the tree of life. Just like I just stand there dumbfounded every night.
The other show is Mr. Burns, which is a new play, or not new, but a contemporary play.
Well, that sounds fantastic, and the new home sounds delightful, and we can't wait to see it.
Well, thanks. So we hope you will come and let us know when you're there, and
have a picnic on the lawn.
Thanks for having us here.
Yeah.
Kurt and Nance, thank you so much for joining us today.
Our privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. It was delightful talking to you.
Thank you.
Guys. Thanks a lot.
I'm Garrett Vandermeer.
And I'm Jim Elliott.
And thank you for listening to The State of Shakespeare. And that's our podcast. Man, I feel so like I have the greatest job in the world.
Yeah.
I love
Guys, it's just that's so easy.
Oh my God.
There's nothing to it. Like having coffee with somebody.
It's so like I have this big smile on my face because it's just so delightful.
Thanks for joining us for the State of Shakespeare podcast. We invite you to visit stateofshakespeare.com for more episodes, information about each of our guests, and the Shakespeare text you heard on the program, and much more. And we welcome you to join the discussion by liking us on Facebook. That's www.stateofshakespeare.com. Thanks for listening.